Ms. Meng, you're recognized. No, we're going to go. You were here when we started, I believe. And if not, take advantage of it.
Okay, thank
Go ahead. Pretend you were.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Franco and DeLauro, and to our witnesses for being here. In June 1981, 5 cases of a mysterious illness appeared in Los Angeles. And that moment marked the beginning of the HIV epidemic in America. Since then, over 700,000 Americans have died from this illness, including 8,000 each year. But HIV/AIDS didn't start here, but we knew that protecting Americans and addressing the AIDS epidemic meant fighting the disease globally. And that's why PEPFAR is important. Since 2003, we have saved 26 million lives through PEPFAR and another 65 million through investments in worldwide HIV response programs like the Global Fund. We're actively helping to treat, you've heard the numbers, over 20 million people with life-saving medication, including pregnant women. We have prevented 7.8 million babies from being born with HIV. And as a mom, that last number means so much to me. Because of this program, millions of children have been able to grow up without worrying about treatment or passing HIV on to others. Meanwhile, PEPFAR's annual regular funding since 2009 has been flat. In fact, the cost of treating someone has dropped from $1,200 a year in 2003 to just $58 in 2023. And that sounds pretty efficient to me, Mr. Chairman. PEPFAR is a crown jewel, but this administration's illegal, unconstitutional, and chaotic attacks on USAID, our public servants, and the programs they support are jeopardizing decades of progress. Ms. Connor, I'm very worried about the impacts of the stop work order on ARVs. This is, as you know, medication that 20 million people receive that helps stop the spread of HIV. And each day of the foreign aid freeze, over 220,000 people, including 7,000 of them who are children, were blocked from receiving these. As you mentioned in your testimony, a study showed that 1 in 5 HIV-positive children who experienced treatment interruptions died. Interrupting ARV treatment risks creating drug-resistant HIV trains, correct? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, and thank you for raising this question. You know, when I started working at EGPAF, I had to go around to members of Congress and tell them there were 2,000 children that were acquiring HIV every day. And that number is down to 300, which is still too many by any measure, but that just kind of speaks to the success. And a lot of that is because of the ability to put pregnant women on treatment. So I just want to thank you for raising that issue. You know, drug resistance and treatment failure is a really big problem, especially in the pediatric community. A lot of children who are exposed to HIV are exposed, again, through pregnancy, labor and delivery, and breastfeeding. And so if they do end up being HIV positive, often they are resistant to the drugs that their mother may have been taking. And so we have to be very vigilant on that. And that's why treatment disruptions in the adult and the pediatric community are so important to try to avoid, is that we do find that when people's treatment is disrupted, not only do they get drug resistance, but their virus tends to spike, right? So not only have they stopped treatment, they are actually, they get sick very fast, and that means that they're able to infect other people, and they won't even really understand or know that. So this is an area that we take really seriously, and as we're looking at sort of where the disruptions are, we are trying to make sure and work very closely with the ministries that at least where we can, that ARVs are being supplied, and again, hopefully at the levels that people can adhere. But we are starting to see some rationing of medications as well, just because of the uncertainty. I want to be clear that uncertainty here is almost more dangerous than what's happening on the ground, is that ministries and partners are unable to plan ahead, unable to look at what's available and sort of redistribute resources. It's just everyone's a little bit frozen in place, and that has its own damaging impacts.
Thank you so much. And I'll pivot quickly to, if I still have time left, to my home state of New York. The administration's dismantling of USAID obviously will impact so many of the communities and districts that we all represent. Between 2022 and 2024, USAID contracts were responsible for over $12 billion in grants and funding to organizations and universities here in the U.S. In my home state, we received over $185 million during that period, money that went to disease research and treatment and programs to help reduce the cost of everyday goods like coffee. And now the administration has canceled many of them. One of the impacted groups is the International AIDS Vaccine Alliance, headquartered in New York City. They were developing a promising vaccine that was already in clinical trials, and the administration canceled their contract, resulting in the end of that clinical trial. You know, an American-led, taxpayer-funded HIV vaccine trial was actively underway, and if successful, could have helped prevent almost 32,000 Americans and 1.3 million people around the world from getting HIV each year. Ambassador, can you discuss the impact that an HIV vaccine and other injectables would have had on treatment costs and PEPFAR's sustainability?
Yeah, yes, thank you for the question. I'll do it quite quickly. The vaccine was, by the way, I used to be on the board of IAVI, so I want to make that clear. So I was involved in some of that planning. The new technologies that are available, there are long-acting injectable drugs that actually prevent infection. So like you would take malaria, anti-malaria drugs when you travel. This is the same. It's called pre-exposure prophylaxis. You take antiretrovirals to prevent getting infected in the same way you treat, just like you do with malaria. So a couple of companies have developed injectable products that you can have one injection every 3 or 6 months, and the 6-month one should be available, we hope, soon, by American technology and American companies. One injection every 3 to 6 months could prevent new infections, which is how we get to no more infections. And then the vaccine would add on to that as well. There are a couple of countries, the United Kingdom and the Netherlands, that are very close to achieving that. And the United States was getting close. The first Trump administration actually put the end of HIV as a top priority for them domestically. And it is possible, and these new technologies will make it possible. If you can give an injection once every 3 to 6 months and prevent new infections, there's a pill that does that as well that is being used. And it was starting to be used in Africa. So for the long term, one of the key parts of sustainability transition is get the new infections down. And a second part of that, and this is an unfortunate part, but it happens to all of us. If you do an actuarial analysis, there have been many people on therapy now for 20 years. So there have been estimates of the fact that they're going to start dying from natural causes, even if they retain their antiretroviral therapy. So if you reduce the number of new infections, you have an increase in death for natural causes, you get down to a very small number of people that will need treatment for the future. That's sustainability. But that requires planning. Countries are ready for that planning. I can't tell you, Africans want a transition. They are not looking for this to continue forever. They want a transition, but they want a transition that they can manage because it shifts responsibility to them, and they want the private sector very much at the table. They want all the things we've been talking about. So you have ready partners to go with, but these technologies are hugely important to achieve that ultimate goal. And we can actually have an AIDS-free generation because of those new technologies, including the vaccine and including the long-acting injectable products.